Welcome to the podcast, where we teach you how to create marketing that pops. Get ready for refreshing conversations with industry experts, trendsetters, and creative minds that'll leave you bubbling with inspiration. Get ready to turn up the volume on your business. Let's get popping. Welcome back to Marketing That Pops. I'm Olivia, and
I'm Michelle.
And, we've been talking a lot about AI on the pod. So today we're going to be taking a little break from that. But don't worry, we have some things in the work if you are interested in AI. MJ BizCon is coming up. And if you guys are going to be attending, Michelle is going to be speaking at MJ BizCon all about AI. So if you are attending, make sure to snag a seat at her session and you can hear all about that. And if you do go to MJ BizCon, our booth number is 5621, and you guys can come by and chat with us, and that'll be a fun time. But today we have Carter on the pod with us, Carter from East Coast Cannabis, and he's a brand manager over there. So Carter, welcome to Marketing That Pops.
Hey, thanks Olivia. Thanks Michelle. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, Carter, tell us a little bit about your role and how you got to East Coast Cannabis.
Yeah, sure. A little bit about my role. So my title is brand manager, but when I was hired, I was sort of the only marketing person as on the team. So by default, I've been sort of the catch-all marketing person.
Mm-hmm.
But that felt pretty appropriate given my background. So I found my way to the marketing world at a marketing agency like the one that you guys are at today. And I started as a communications specialist, which I don't even really know what that means. Essentially, it's like, if we don't want to do it, you do it. So I did a lot of like social media work. I did a lot of website copy or website maintenance. It helped build PR plans. I sort of had to learn an aspect of the entire marketing suite at the agency. We were really small too. There were only, I think, 10 of us. And I worked there for about 5 years. And then that company was bought by another company, which is a much larger agency. And because I had developed this sort of Swiss Army knife skill set, they put me in account manager role. So I was sort of like the point person between client and our teams, and was leading our teams, which I had, an SEO team, a website team, a copywriting team, a design team. So I, for those clients, I was sort of like the de facto marketing director for their agency relationship. So when I went into the internal marketing side, I sort of felt like I could ride that line pretty well between like marketing director so that sort of like generalist role. So I started, when I branched out of the agency world, I went into a technology company. I worked at a cybersecurity company for a couple of years. And then I knew that I sort of wanted to do something more B2C focused or more consumer retail focused. So I was looking for a bunch of different jobs, and I still was working remote at that point. So I thought I would do like something remote, but East Coast is, I think, a quarter of a mile from my house. I saw that they had listed this role. It seemed really interesting. I really liked their brand. So took a big leap, reached out to them, and here I am. So I've been here since last October. So I'm almost working on my first year. New to the cannabis industry from a professional standpoint. And yeah, it's been great. But it's all to say, like, I'm a brand manager, but I sort of oversee all the marketing aspects of the company. Since being here, I've been able to bring in they were already working at our company, but I sort of absorbed them as a part of our marketing team. And then I brought on a new hire as well. So now the marketing team is 3 people, and who knows, maybe next year it'll be 5 or 6. We'll see.
Isn't that always the case though with marketing? It's like you wear all the hats of everything. It's just like, yeah, we need this.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I'm like very envious of a specialist, but I also don't know that I could ever have the attention span to do it.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We always have like new people start out like that, and then it's really great because they get to understand every piece of the marketing, right? And at
Yeah, for
least
sure.
they get their toes in each section. And I like to sit back and kind of watch and see what they're naturally really good at and which
Oh yeah.
is the area, because a lot of like younger people when they first start out, they don't know, they just got a marketing degree and they know
Yeah.
they want to be in a creative agency, and then it either they think they want to do social media, but then once they start doing it they realize, I don't know if I like this, I think
Yeah.
I like doing like designs, or I like writing copy, but I don't like dealing with the other things. So it's kind of fun to like watch people kind of evolve as they grow.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. And you do sort of fall into your comfort zone or your natural way of doing things. Like I found out really early that the pace of social, like the sort of relentlessness of it is like it's not for me. So if I can give that to somebody else, I will gladly do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
especially in cannabis because it's
Yeah,
tough.
I mean, I found it true with other industries too. Like even industries that you would be like, oh, we probably just get to reuse assets over and over again. No one's really paying attention. But I worked for like a utility company, and the amount of work involved in maintaining their social profiles was staggering. So, but
Yeah.
definitely with the B2C thing where you're really trying to engage a consumer and get them to come into the store or still like have loyalty with you even after their first experience, and you're trying to really build that relationship. It takes a lot of time and effort, and social media is so ephemeral that you really have to feed it over and over
Mhm.
again, that it's an exhausting treadmill.
Mhm.
It is.
Yes, we love our social media managers because man, it's a role.
Unspoken heroes, unsung
Yeah,
Yes.
heroes. They're
Yeah.
unsung heroes, the social media teams.
and always changing, always changing. Like every time you
Yeah,
turn
yeah.
around.
Especially cannabis. That's been one of the biggest learning curves outside of the restrictions that either states may require or um, the different platforms require. Just keeping up with the changing landscape of how you can post on social, what you can say, how you can say it, what will get flagged, what will get you taken down. It all feels so amorphous that treading lightly is sort of the best thing that we can do. But even still, like we
Yeah.
had on Labor Day, we posted something that we thought it was pretty benign, but it was taken down. Luckily, it didn't
Mhm.
cause any other repercussions on our profile, but it was funny. Like that same week, we had a conversation about a totally different post, and we were worried that that other post would potentially get us flagged. There was, multiple emails and text messages exchanged, and
Mhm.
ultimately we decided let's take the risk. When that's not even the post that Meta cared about.
Yeah, it never is. It's almost like they just kinda, like, cherry pick, like, "Oh, we don't like this today."
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe it's like I imagine there's a first pass of AI that will
Mhm.
flag you, and then there's probably a manual arbiter who's like, yes, no, and maybe we got him on the wrong day. Who knows?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, let's just talk about East Coast Cannabis just for a second before we hop in.
Yeah,
Um, so you guys have 3 retail locations, right? And
we
then
do. Yeah.
cultivation facilities?
Yep, we
Or
have
2
two
cultivation.
cultivations. So,
Okay, yeah. You guys are
yeah.
killing it with the marketing and the branding. I
Oh,
am
thanks.
loving it. Love the website. Love what you guys are doing. But I know you guys have like a new flagship that's going to be opening up soon. So tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about.
yeah. So we've been operating out of a temporary space for I think probably since we opened our first retail location, which is in 2021. Um, but with COVID and all kinds of other construction delays, the building has been sort of in a flux period, but it's nearing completion. I was just there last week and they were installing all the millwork. So the retail location is going to be absolutely beautiful. We've got really high ceilings. There's going to be awesome light. In that space, we're also going to have a sort of peek through window into a cultivation room, and we're going to have a window into our test kitchen. So it'll be a much more interactive experience than most of the other retailers in our space have. It's going to be a real destination. At least that's what we're hoping for. And yeah, that should open this fall. We're really excited about it, and we'll definitely have a lot more communications around the timing of it once everything has been solidified. But yeah, we'll do a big party. There's going to be food and music and games and events and discounts and all kinds of stuff. So it's going to be a big celebration.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it looks amazing from what I've seen, especially like the glass windows that you guys have, like the
Yes,
kind of
very
like,
tall
yeah,
windows.
they're very, very tall.
Yeah.
It looks really nice. Okay, so are you ready to do our myth that you get to debunk today?
Yes, I'm very nervous, but yes, let's do it. What if I can't debunk it?
You'll be able to.
Okay.
So usually, it's a myth around, whatever topic that we're talking about. And today we're kind of talking about cannabis. So
Yeah.
there's like these questions that are out there that people have that are kind of just like, we need to debunk these. So for every strain of cannabis, do you believe that it makes you laugh uncontrollably, or those are kind of the effects that you would get from cannabis, so to say?
Okay. I'm relieved that I can answer this question. No, no strain gives you the same effect. In the same way that like no beer would taste the same or provide the same like headspace. There's just, or in the same way that like this all food provides the same
Mhm.
sensation of fullness um, or delight in your stomach, whatever sort of metaphor you want to use. I think every cannabis strain gives you some different type of effects, whether it's a really heady high or a very bodily flavored high. Um, some intoxication does allow you to be really goofy and laughy and giggly, and others put you in a more introspective mood, or some just put you in a sort of relaxed, um, carefree mood. It's all sort of dependent on not only the strain, but how your body will react to the strain.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not as well versed in this as our cultivation team, but even terpenes have different effects, and even the
Mhm.
same strain may have different sets of terpenes, which then give you a different experience. And then, additionally, like depending on how that strain has been cultivated for minor cannabinoids, that can also interact
Mhm.
differently with your body. So, unfortunately, everything is somewhat unpredictable, and you just have to try and see how your body reacts to it.
Yeah. It's just funny because, some people, they do have like this kind of, the thinking about cannabis, and,
Oh,
we
for
try to
sure.
educate as much as we can to let people know, like, like you said, you have to experience it for yourself. And also, like, not everything is what you read.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I never want to be out in a public place doing it because I don't know what it's gonna do. Because I don't know if I'm gonna
That's
be
fair.
conked out sleeping in like 5 minutes or like what I'm gonna be doing. So unless I'm like familiar with it, I'm like, yeah, okay. I have to be home and close to a bed just in case.
Yeah, that's
That's
fair.
good thinking, though,
It's
especially
good to
if you're
be
trying.
prepared.
Mhm.
Yeah, kind of. That just reminded me of Benzinga. So
Oh my gosh. Yes.
little like off topic thing. So there's this trade show in Chicago. It's called Benzinga, and we all went, and so Olivia was there, and we had a couple other people, and we were walking around the trade show, and there was this guy handing out gummies, and I said, and everybody's just grabbing them and just popping them in, and I said,
Yeah.
we're not going to get high on this, are we? oh no, it's CBD, blah, blah, blah. So we all pop one in, and then all of a sudden, then we all, after everybody chomped them down, he was like, Delta 8 or something like that is in it.
Oh, yeah.
And like after like we're like, oh my goodness. And then like about an hour and a half later, we're all like, whoa. We were trying to get back in our room, and because we had just checked out that day, we went back up there. We're like trying to like get in and drink it in. So we ended up sitting up in the like little lobby where they have all the chairs by the elevators, and we're all like, just like
Oh,
sitting,
no.
like,
Yeah.
we were dying. We were like, that never again. We will never.
Yeah, you gotta,
Unforgettable memory.
yes, at least, yeah, you created a memory. It sounds like nobody was hurt, so that's good. But yeah, you always you have to be careful when people are handing you something.
Yeah.
You never know.
Lesson learned for sure.
So, Carter, I saw recently that you guys had Mike Tyson come and visit the
Yeah, we did.
facility. Yeah, tell us how that came about.
Yeah, so we're a brand partner with Tyson 2.0. We have a few different brand partners. We're brand partners with Belushi Farms, which does the Blues Brothers cannabis. Tyson 2.0. We're a cookies partner, but we're still in the early stages of that. And then we have a sort of local or brand called Betty's Eddies that we're also a provider for. But what that allows us is it allows us to bring in their products to our retail stores. Every state's like a little different, so obviously everything from that product line is grown and manufactured by us. We're just basically licensing their branding on the packaging. But that also gives us access to their team and their marketing efforts, and in this case for Tyson 2.0, it gets us access to Mike Tyson because he's the brand spokesperson for that brand.
Mm-hmm.
So we approached his team about availability. They gave us some dates. We picked some dates, and then then it was on us to figure out, okay, so he's going to come to Maine. What do we want to do? And there were a couple of things that we floated, but the timing was pretty fast on that. So we had to act, pretty swiftly. I think we had, a month, maybe a month and a half from approaching him to then having the event. So it was a little chaotic on our end, but I think we did a great job collecting everything, pulling it together, and having a really successful event. But yeah, so Mike Tyson came to Maine. We used him at the beginning of the day for a photo shoot to just gather a bunch of assets. Given that we had access to him, we thought let's do some more like co-branding aspects. There's obviously with their partnership, we get a bunch of Tyson 2.0 assets, social media photos, posters, all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to have a more personalized touch, which is the hardest part of being a brand anyways, just getting those like custom assets that are really to your brand. Everyone can use a stock site, and we do that too from time to time. But when you have like your own products in your own environments and you're able to really customize it, it just creates for a much more personalized experience. Definitely is a lot more work, but in my opinion, it really adds to the sense of your brand. So given that we had Tyson, we did a photo shoot and got some assets for social, the website, for promotional activities. And he was super easy to work with. He's a real professional. And then we brought him to our dispensary and just kind of had like a random meet and greet with customers that were there. Some people like were calling their friends. They're like, you got to get over here. Mike Tyson's at the store.
Right.
We were there for maybe a half hour. Like we didn't let anyone know that was going to happen. We just wanted it to be the spontaneous, like, look, Mike Tyson's here. And oddly enough, that happens quite a bit in Maine. Like we're right on the border between Maine and New Hampshire. And a lot of East Coasters will vacation in Maine, and some of those people are famous. So periodically, I'll get a text from my wife or a friend. It's like, Martha Stewart's at Bob's Clam Hut. cool, I'm working. I'm not going to go see Martha Stewart, but that's great. Or like last week for Labor Day, Matt Damon was at like the coffee shop by my house, and somebody sent me a news article that was what Matt Damon ordered at Lil's. I was like, I don't really care, but that's cool that happened. So it was fun to have this, be a part of creating that experience for people, to bring Tyson into the store. And he was great. He was really responsive to people. He wanted to make sure everyone felt like they had their own personal interaction with him. And then later in the day, we had run a contest with some customers to win a ticket to go then spend a couple hours with Mike Tyson.
Oh,
so we did this exclusive event. Yeah, we did this exclusive event with Tyson, and we invited some wholesale partners and some other business partners and some employees to be part of this private event. But we really also wanted to reward customers, so we ran a contest in store for people to win a ticket, and then we pulled about a half dozen people we pulled up 15 people, but then they got a +1 to come meet Tyson. So it was a small event where you could get your picture taken with him and spend a couple of minutes just chatting with him. So yeah, it was a big day. I mean, it was my entire Friday was absorbed by all this work, but it was a lot of fun. And I think we got some great, some assets from the photo shoot. And then obviously we were able to delight customers in a really fun and interesting way. And we got some press coverage for it too, which is always good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's really exciting. And I like how you guys made a campaign out of it, and you had like the drawing and everything that went into it. It's so nice to talk to marketing professionals who know and understand like all of the work that goes into planning an event or something like that. So I can tell you that was a whole lot that you guys did on your part. So that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important for us to make everything intentional and add to the experience. Like as a retailer, we want to make sure our customers are always top of mind, always getting the best from us, either from a product standpoint or from an experience standpoint or from a customer service standpoint. It's really important to us that we delight our customers.
So Carter, what would you say is one of the better marketing tactics that you've been doing that you've seen the best success with so far?
That's a good question. In some cases, I'm going to give you a bad answer because I think that because the industry is so nascent, and especially in Maine, there's still a lot of companies that are that haven't made the full investment in hiring a marketing person or bringing on an agency. They're really still owner-operated marketing teams. There's some really simple things that we've been able to do to just add a certain level of sophistication to our market that are not glamorous by any means, but like having posters about promotions or sending emails about promotions or posting on social regularly and trying to we can't be as explicit about sales and promotions on social just given the restrictions that Meta provides, but we're able to at least tie in graphical elements or some language, some copywriting that relates to promotions that we're running on other platforms like our website or in stores. That I think it's not a big mental leap for our customers to see a social post, see our website, see a promotion in store and make those connections. But just trying to be intentional about how we're communicating and what we're communicating so that it adds to promoting a certain product or highlighting a sale and promotion that we're doing or talking about an initiative that is important to our core values like quality or safety. Just trying to create through lines through all of the marketing efforts that we do. That's like a really simple answer, but it's something that I think a lot of companies miss today because they either don't have the bandwidth for it or they haven't put in the structure or the the sort of order of operations to make that through line possible. And so their marketing seems a little scattershot, which I know I say that because cannabis is so nascent, that is pretty prevalent here, but it's true of a lot of other industries I've worked in, where really just putting the effort into doing foundational pieces and trying to make those lines between the connective tissue between all of your marketing efforts a little more visible.
Mm-hmm.
Just doing something as simple as that really can add a lot to the effectiveness of your marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like you were talking about the foundational stuff, and I think that's really important, and just the consistency. So say
Yeah.
you just need to commit to, even if it's just 2 social media posts a week, if that's all you think you can do, then do that, and that consistency. Once you start doing that, then you're like, oh, I think I can sneak in another one. And, and then people will start getting used to seeing it. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with them. So that's really like how the best way to get started with everything. And then you'll, start adding on additional like things here and there, and making your team crazy because you're like, oh, I have to do this now.
Yeah. I learned pretty early in my career that you're always going to have resource constraints, and so it's just important to do what you can do, what you have the bandwidth to do, very effectively. Even if that's a small set of things. So if you only have the energy to really keep your website and your menu up to date, just do that. Don't try to spread yourself thin over every single possible platform. There's obviously some things that you want to be present on. Like you wouldn't want to lose your social profiles, at least your handles, because you didn't hop on that early enough. So at least sort of putting your stake in the ground is helpful. The more you can do, the better, obviously. But if you really are limited in resources, do the couple of things that you can do super effectively. And then also weigh the effectiveness, the impact of that effort too. So I've had a lot of people when I was at an agency to be like, we need to do social. Like social's the thing that's the problem we have in our company. And we would talk with them and realize, yeah, social's probably a problem you have, but you have this other really big problem that's totally unrelated to social. And actually social will just highlight that problem for you. So we need to fix like the impact that this other thing would have on your business before you really start to consider social, because we could put all our effort toward your social media platforms and you're not going to see any impact because there's no way for people to buy online. And that's the real factor that you have, or whatever the case may be. I think weighing the impact of your efforts is super important. And it's a step that you have to take a step back and evaluate what you're doing. And when you're sort of in the wheel of operating, it'd be hard to take that step back out. But yeah, I think that's a super important aspect. It's something that's it's important. It's super hard to do when you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour and trying to just get everything done. But without doing that, you can't really assess like, did all this effort and all this chaos or all this work that I've been putting myself through, did it move the needle in any direction? Could I do without it? I think a lot about, like, obviously with cannabis, we can't do this in the same degree, but there are certain platforms that we can advertise on. And, but back in my previous life, we'd be running Google ads and Meta ads and really build those systems up. But it was always in the back of my mind. I was like, what if we did none of it? What would happen if we did none of it? Would we see any change at all? Or is this a self-driving force that we think is helpful, but we don't actually know? And until you have the freedom to sort of actually evaluate the absence of it, it can be difficult to know if it's truly adding enough impact for the effort that you have. And I've always worked on really small teams, so we've never had a situation where everyone was in their role doing one specific thing, that sort of specialist environment that I talked about yearning for. I never really had in that. So there's always been some level of we're spreading ourselves across multiple channels to do this. But yeah, it's always been in my mind of like, what if we stop doing it? Will we even notice in
Right.
3 months that we stop doing it?
Yeah.
With advertising, it's hard because there's so much money and effort put into it.
Yeah.
And even if you see minimal results, you see some results. You're like, well, I don't want to give up results.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something you have to weigh very carefully.
So in Maine, I think the last time I talked to you, there wasn't a lot of other dispensaries near you. Has that changed? Is it becoming more competitive there? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In the last 6 months, we've seen at least 3 dispensaries open within a half mile of our Elliott location. We've seen, I think, 2 additional dispensaries open in our Lebanon within our Lebanon location, and then we opened our Waterville location in October of last year, and that was already a pretty saturated environment that we moved into. And so I don't think that there's been any change of dispensaries there, but we sort of already moved into an area that was saturated. So there's a lot more attention paid to competition here. And the other factor that like we have to consider is we hold a big market share of retail sales in the adult rec market for the state of Maine. And so when we make a move, let's just say on pricing, that affects the entire market
Right.
because we do hold so much of the market share. So any pricing decisions we have to be really careful about, because as anyone who's priced anything knows, you can't ever raise it. It's always
Right.
going down.
Uh-huh.
Or you raise it to your peril, I guess I should say. You can't,
Yeah.
you just will lose your customers for that. But we
Right.
see, if we make it a price adjustment, we see that ripple across the state. Not to say that we're the most powerful by any means. I think every other company in the state has a certain level of power that we're all sort of trying to dance and navigate. Because if somebody came in and really was giving steep discounts on products, we'd have to consider that even if they were a small player. So everyone in the market, because it's so new, does have power. But given the share that we hold on the state, we bear a certain level of responsibility for that in a way that a smaller player probably doesn't in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned like how, you really have to think about the customer and putting the customer first. And I know communication is the key to that. So when you guys are thinking about like your pricing structure and discounts and things like that, do you guys find yourself doing that more on like a monthly basis, or or is it like you need to stay in front of the customer, like we're have to send out a text every week on, that type of thing? Like, how do you guys kind of work with that?
Yeah. So I've sort of a couple different answers for that. We definitely are constantly looking at pricing and just trying to evaluate where we sit within the market. But we brand ourselves as a higher tier premium product. So
Mm,
we'll always sit in, if not an average, like a little above average price point, um, intentionally, at least the East Coast Cannabis brand. With our partner brands and our house brands, we have a little more freedom to price more liberally.
mhm,
Even though like the product quality and our standards are the same for those other brands, because we're sort of like a house of brands, we approach each brand slightly differently in terms of how we want it to be perceived. And our East Coast Cannabis brand is our flagship brand. That's the one we want to keep at this sort of like accessible but higher end type of
mm,
product. Um, so we think about that very differently when it comes to promotions and pricing and discounts. Whereas our other brands like Camp Cannabis, for instance, that's more of our budget friendly brand. It's a more approachable, um, lighthearted type of
mm,
brand. So we can treat it a little differently than we treat East Coast Cannabis. And same thing
mm,
with Tyson and Belushi. Like some of those standards are obviously dictated by those brands, but we have a certain amount of control of how we want to treat them and within our own retail space, but we treat them more as like you're sort of like everyday accessible brand in the same way that like a Nordstrom's might approach like Fry versus Keds. You know, you're
Right.
like
Yep.
they want to have similar quality. They want like they wouldn't bring it in their stores if they didn't think that they matched their brand standards, but they're going to treat those SKUs and those brands differently because they can they speak to two different customers, and so they can sort of pull levers in different ways. I like to, and just in general, I think it's helpful because cannabis is just a consumer product. I think speaking in analogs or like making analogies around other types of retail environments has been really helpful for us. So we often will talk about like beer because it has a very similar type of set of regulations, although we're in a much more stringent area. I think eventually we will work our way more toward a sort of beer regulation standpoint versus like tobacco. I don't think we'll fall. Hopefully we don't fall into sort of restrictions that tobacco is limited in. I think we'll fall more into a beer. But like apparel is another really good one, like I just showed.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry. Michelle, I also will go on tangents and totally get lost in my train of thought. But from a East Coast Cannabis brand standpoint, we try to limit the number of promotions that we run on that brand. So we're trying to think more from a annual standpoint, like how we pull that lever, but definitely from an overall pricing structure, we look at that on a monthly basis, and then we make evaluations on probably like a quarterly basis. But that just when I say we evaluate, it maybe we decide not to make any changes, you know, but occasionally we will make those changes.
Are you doing like weekly email campaigns or like text campaigns? I don't remember.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
So like I mentioned, when I was hired, there wasn't really a marketing department. So I've been slowly starting to implement some of that stuff. So we work with Alpine IQ.
Okay.
But we just made that switch at the beginning of the summer. We had been using a different loyalty partner that had a communications arm, but as I was working through it, it became clear to me that communications platform was going to be much more difficult than it needed to be. So we started to do a reevaluation process, and I really liked Alpine IQ. They're like the closest thing I could find to a HubSpot or some type of like more traditional marketing platform. So we haven't fully rolled out all of our communications yet for Alpine, but the structure we have in place that will probably begin, if not Q4, it will start this in 2025, is rolling out a monthly newsletter, an email newsletter. We'll be doing win back campaigns and welcome series campaigns. We'll probably segment by the Alpine IQ allows you to segment by what they call life cycle stage, which essentially is like how frequent they've been a consumer, and they parse it as like active, I think chilled, and then the ones that are most important to our win back campaigns are like about to be lost or fully lost. And we want to bring those people back. Obviously, being in Maine, we have a large tourist population, so there's probably like I would say 25 to 30% of our audience doesn't live near us, and they just come here to vacation in the summer. So we capture those people. So a win back campaign will only be so effective for them. It might just help them remember that we exist if they come back to Maine that next summer. But definitely for the local people, we want to make sure that we're adding value to them and reminding them that we're here. And if they came to us 2 years ago, there's a lot has changed since those 2 years. So we want to be a presence for them. So we'll have multiple email series with Alpine. We're also relying heavily on their app function and trying to push communications to that app function. whether that's offering like exclusive deals for different customers or flash sales, things of that nature. But we try to limit the sort of discounting aspect of things. So a lot of companies will around our market will do daily deals, or they'll do, if they don't do daily deals, they might do, large discounts on certain SKUs.
Yeah.
And we do we don't do daily deals. We do discounts on certain SKUs from time to time, but our strategy for next year is really to like keep the price stable and do like flash sales or exclusive deals for specific audience members as a way to just build further loyalty. I think a lot of this year we've been testing if we do like a daily deal style pricing structure, or if we do large discount pricing structure, does that help us acquire new customers or bring customers back in? And I think the data suggests that it really doesn't move the needle in the way that we would like it to. Just because we run a sale for, let's say, like 3 weeks on one SKU, we might see an increase in sales in that SKU, but we don't see such a dramatic increase that it justifies the work and effort that was put into it. And it doesn't acquire us new customers in the way that would justify the work and effort put into it. So there are likely other levers that we could use to bring people to the dispensary or to retain them in other ways. So one thing that we have found a lot of success with is doing like non-cannabis giveaways. Like we did a raffle for canoes. We gave away a canoe at each of our locations. That definitely brought a lot of interest and new customers. We have done giveaways with our Tyson 2.0 brand partner. And we've done giveaways with our Tyson 2.0 brand partner. And those have been a way for us to bring more attention to our store without just using pricing as the lever. I think it's sort of the default for our market to use pricing as the lever, and we're trying to find other ways to move that.
Yeah, we have seen that too. Like, and we struggle because people go lower and lower. And it's like at some point you can't keep lowering your price.
Exactly, and that's our worry too. Is that like there's going to be a bottom to this, and obviously we're not in the maturity of California or a Colorado, so we don't have to. We know that like our pricing today will not be our pricing in 5 years from now. Just if we look at other markets in the United States, it's going to shift for us. Our prices will probably never be as high as they are now. We recognize that, but we don't need to go directly to the lowest price to start with, because we see a market like Oregon, which is struggling heavily due to overproduction and low prices. They're struggling to figure out like how do they become sustainable businesses and make a large scale impact. And my worry, and I think a lot of worry about the cannabis industry, is that when stigmatization and safe banking, descheduling, rescheduling, when all of those assets within the federal government start to relax restrictions on cannabis, will a large player like Anheuser-Busch, or I don't anticipate pharma would move in, but let's just say like Johnson & Johnson, they move in, they could just buy up all of us. We're not a significant enough player to fight back against a huge multi-billion-dollar operator. None of us are. And in a situation like Oregon, where the prices are so low and the manufacturing is so unstable due to profitability, a huge company could come and just buy them all up, and then there are no small businesses anymore. And we don't want to fall prey to that. So that's where some of our caution around pricing comes from too, is we want to make sure that this is a profitable business for us, that we have 100 employees. We want to make sure that they have enough money to survive, that they have enough money to like raise a family, that this is a legitimate business and not some side hustle for people. To do that, you have to be much more methodical about how you price, how you sell, how you grow the business. And at least our intention is to be really methodical about that because our founders they're just normal people. They're not huge investors that came in and decided to start a cannabis business because they saw all this money available to them. They were just regular people who were doing this as a side hustle, saw it being legalized, came into it as like fully earnest people wanting to start a business and grow a business and build a community. And so with that as sort of our baseline ethos, I think it's important that we sustain that as we grow and as we become mature. You know, in the threat that things will be very different 10 years from now.
Right. Yeah. I know in some states or even geographic areas, like we were talking with a couple other dispensaries, and some areas are really responsive to the text messaging or email. Some are more like getting a postcard. Some are more responsive to billboards. Like, have you seen, like in Maine, like what do you feel that people seem to be most responsive to?
Yeah. So a couple of things. The state of Maine does not allow billboards. Like they're not even for non-cannabis. There just are not billboards. So billboarding is not a option for us. In New Hampshire, we could put billboards, but then we run the risk of like potentially asking people to cross state lines, which would be against the rule in the state of Maine. Massachusetts doesn't have that problem. I see billboards all over Massachusetts for dispensaries. And then I have a personal hot take on text messaging. I think most people use it the wrong way and they end up spamming their customers. To me, a text message it's like the last secure place for personal communications. So not to say that I don't have brands that I've signed up for text messaging for, or that we don't send text messages, but I try to be very respectful of the fact that most people do not want frequent text messages from a brand that they shop with. And that might change over the course of the next 10 years. You know, it could be that I have a similar feeling the way that people felt about email 20 years ago. And now 20 years later, it's emails like the place that you freely give information to companies so that you can get promotions, and then maybe you just ignore them over and over again. It could be that text messaging sort of works its way that way. But at the particular time, I think that brands need to be very conscious around the sort of like sanctity of that relationship. If I'm going to text message you, I need to, I'm a brand, I need to give you true value. So not just, hey, stop in our store. We've got, you know, a bunch of products for you to try. It needs to be like either you're getting 20% off the SKU if you come in the next 2 hours or the next day, or it needs to be something of true value that I can appreciate as a consumer versus some generic thing. Even like an event would, I think I'd have to be very careful. I'd be very thoughtful about how I would try to promote an event through text messaging, because it just doesn't seem like the value is quite there. The other problem I have with texting within the cannabis space is that because we're not able to do it within the strict restrictions of the FCC, I'm very wary about having this sort of burner number type of concept that most platforms, I think, out of necessity, have you operate under. I know Alpine recently rolled out a different system that will work within the FCC guidelines, and that I'm very interested in finding out more about and figuring out if that feels a little more secure. But I don't like the sort of status quo that we've been operating under for the last, I don't know how long, but at least since I've been in the cannabis space. It's been too unreliable to know, like, is my message going to get delivered? Am I going to get flagged? Are we going to get taken down? Are we going to potentially have this huge fine from T-Mobile or Verizon?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
the risks there for the benefit haven't matched. I haven't seen enough payback from texts that we've sent to say, yeah, it's worth the risk. But we'll see if that changes. I will say that in terms of communication, if we send an email or a app push notification or a text message, we see sales related to those. And so
Mhm.
that's encouraging that like if we were able to do it more freely, the text messaging aspect, if that were more in line with regulations and we had consistency there, I could see it being a really powerful tool. Like I said, I still would be very careful about how I use it because like you're forging a very personal relationship with your consumer at that point where you're texting them. Like you don't text strangers, you text like your family, your friends.
Yeah.
But so if I'm texting a stranger, like I want it to matter to them. They need to
Mhm.
know like they get something from this. But yeah, I could see that being a powerful tool to use if it felt a little more secure. But definitely from an email standpoint, every email we send, we see sales related to. Every push notification we send, we see sales related to those. And I think we still are underusing them. Like we could get more value from them if we
Right.
had the structure in place that we're planning to put into place. I believe it will be a big change in how we see consistent sales.
Mhm. One tip that I have noticed when using like Alpine IQ for deliverability is if you can use any type of like personalized tokens within the text message, you get better delivery. I've just noticed that when I'm working on like campaigns. So if you guys have tried that or haven't tried that, definitely test that out and see if you get any differences with it.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good advice.
Yeah. So you guys have some really cool merch in your store. And so like one of the shirts that I saw, you guys have like the dare shirts and you guys kind
Yeah.
of on it. So for people who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about like what that looks like and maybe the idea
Yeah,
behind it?
for sure. So I can't take credit for that. That predates my time here, but our apparel manager at the time was really interested in blending that sort of like nostalgia with a sort of like um, fun twist. So
Mhm.
obviously, if you were a child in the if maybe Gen X even, but definitely millennials experienced a lot of dare programming in their elementary and perhaps middle school. Um, I know I did, and it's a sort of anti-drug program that actually has a lot of flaws related to it. If you dig into the history of the dare programming, there's no shortage of stories where it was, in many ways, a big failure or a sort of like propagandized system that delivered a lot of inaccuracies, and in some cases, like some really terrible things happened because of dare programs. It's not the case across the board, but there are definitely incidences where Dare did more damage than it should have.
Mhm.
um, but all to say, we wanted to have a sort of like fun take on the Dare nostalgia aspect, especially given that we're a cannabis brand and doing a sort of play on this sort of anti-drug program we thought would be like a fun slant for people. So yeah, it's a sort of interpretation of the Dare logo, and then we added so like to live the adventure, and that live the adventure is the East Coast Cannabis tagline.
Mhm.
So Dare to live the adventure was our sort of like spin on the Dare program, and they're really fun and like they do hit that sort of nostalgia button for you.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Millennials
yeah,
love that.
yeah, it seems like. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe every generation has some level of nostalgia,
Mhm.
but I think because millennials were such like an early internet thing, there's like
Mhm.
maybe just it amplifies that nostalgia feeling a little bit more.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's sort of fun. Our approach with apparel has been to make it very easy for people to because marketing is so restricted in not only
Mhm.
just the state of Maine but in cannabis in general. A big lever for marketing has been apparel for us. So we try to make it like very affordable, even though we want it to be high quality. We'll like intentionally reduce the margins just to get that our brand mark out into the community. And then we try to do fun, interesting things beyond just our logo to add that certain sense of flair. I think Cookies does a pretty good job of this as well, where they've sort of created their own apparel brand out of the Cookies brand. And obviously there's strong ties to it, but you could argue that like Cookies apparel is maybe even more popular than Cookies Cannabis.
Yeah.
And I don't say that like we're trying to do that necessarily, but we want to make apparel a significant portion of our brand identity and our products mix.
Yeah.
So I have to ask about this Pure Michigan that you have. So tell me about that, because you guys are in Maine.
Oh, I think it's just it's a strain name.
It's just a strain name. It's not
it's a strain name.
It's not something from Michigan, actually, or
no, I don't believe so.
No.
I mean, I imagine there's some lineage with the genetic history that is attached to Michigan, or maybe the grower, but yeah, no, it's just the strain name. I'm sorry. I wish that there was a stronger tie to Michigan.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Do they have a location in Michigan that I don't know about? So
sorry.
That's okay. That's all we hear around here is Pure Michigan. So
yeah. Funny.
The travel came.
Maybe the experience you get from consuming it is that you feel like you've been transported to Michigan.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So Carter, I know we've talked a lot about marketing, but how do you feel like you guys stay up on like marketing trends, or do you even buy into trends at all? Like being in the cannabis industry, like what's your take on that?
I think to a certain degree, you have to buy into trends, whether you like it or not, or whether you're paying attention to it or not. Like there's, but I think what most people fail to do when they're, trying to track a trend is they try to just copy the thing that's happening, and by the time the trends hit you, it's sort of you've already hit the wave, the peak of the wave, and you're starting to like move down. I remember, back, this is years ago, but that the ice bucket challenge, like people were doing that years after that trend had sort of peaked, and I was in rooms with different stakeholders of different businesses being like, we should do something like the ice bucket challenge. And it's like, the trend is gone. Like we're beyond it. There's been 3 other trends since that one that we would be better to capitalize on. So in many ways, like once you've seen the trend, it's already starting to like hit its peak, because especially by the time it gets to a brand, it's like it almost becomes the death knell of that trend. It always starts with like individuals doing the trend, and then brands sort of adopt it. And usually the brands with the most amount of like people power or the deepest pockets can capitalize on that early, because they just have more resources than a small business will, and they'll be able to see it faster. They'll be able to produce something quicker. But what I find is that the best way when you're trying to appropriate a trend for your own brand is to truly like try to make it your own and not just do a carbon copy of what someone else has done. Usually the results of a carbon copy end up being kind of awkward or weird, or they don't fully relate to your brand in a way that is helpful for pushing your brand's perspective. You sort of then become just a brand of trends. I see this a lot with certain cannabis brands. Like they're essentially like a meme profile. And like, I think there's something to say about like that tactic. It probably can be very effective for people, especially if their brand is sort of a meme brand. But for many people, like that's not their brand. And for them to then use social as just their meme profile creates a weird incongruous experience between being in the store and meeting the people that actually you buy the products from and interacting with their space. and then being on their website, and then being on their social media platform. It feels like you're hitting like 3 different experiences, 3 different brands. And it creates a very incongruous experience for the consumer to sort of understand like who you are, what you stand for, and why they should shop with you. I think cannabis sort of is getting away with the benefit of it being new and there being so few, I mean, at least in a relative sense, so few available options for people that they can be sort of lackadaisical with some of this marketing stuff now. But when the competition like nationally gets really stiff, there's going to be no room for that. Like it's going to be really hard. You could see it in like a furniture store, for example. Like I drive by a local furniture store here, and nobody goes there. Nobody's in that building. They have a broken window that they've boarded over. It's probably been like that for a couple of years. I think it has to be related to this. They don't have the money to do that, and it's just that the way that people interact with those shops are like very different now that we're in online buying stage, where you can buy a couch from Instagram and you can buy a mattress online, and returning it is super easy. I mean, theoretically, those companies, the smaller businesses, have not been able to sort of keep up with the times. And maybe this is like a larger thing about trends where marketing itself shifts so dramatically from decade to decade that if you're not paying attention to the trends, even outside of like social media trends, but just larger scale trends about how people are shopping and what's causing them to buy and how they want to interact with a company, if you're not paying attention to any of those things, like your business probably will suffer. You can't really float in the same way that you can now, just given the newness of our industry. If you think about like the tech boom of, I mean, I wasn't really that conscious of it because I was so young, but we're living in it now where there were hundreds and hundreds of small providers of technology, like either really, really niche widgets and whatever's like Silicon Valley companies that started. There were hundreds of them, and now it's reduced to like 5 or 6 really big ones, and then a bunch that are struggling and trying to really just like get either an investment from one of those huge companies and become a brand partner of one of those huge companies, or get absorbed by one of those companies. With the tech company I was working at, there was definitely a side strategy. It's like get big enough so that some bigger fish buys us. And I think a lot of tech companies operate that way. Even startups, they want to get bought in by, like, get absorbed by a huge company. And cannabis isn't like that right now. Like the MSOs that are in our space aren't large enough yet to operate in the same way that like a Cisco or a Meta will operate. But it's not going to be like this forever. Like we're in a phase that will end, and what that next phase looks like, we don't really know, but we have enough history behind us to have a sense of what it will look like. So yeah, the larger conversation of trends is like, if you're not watching how your consumers are reacting to different marketing trends, then you're going to fail. You're going to start to lose business. So even if you yourself are not really watching the trend, so to speak, the consumer's operating in a trend.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important to be thinking about, especially on a larger scale, like you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, the social media stuff, it's like, for those trends, like just trying to put your own spin on it in a way that makes sense to your brand and your voice, your brand voice. And if you do it quickly, then it could probably be successful. But if you're like waiting too long, you might miss the boat. If you're just doing a carbon copy, it's probably like, it might be cringeworthy. Like,
right. Yeah.
Absolutely. We don't want any cringe content out there.
No, I mean, we've all had to partake in it. We've all done some level of it.
Yeah,
but like, the more we have, the more we avoid it, the better.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Carter, I appreciate you hopping on here with us today. Is what we'd love to do is if you want to tell people like where they can find East Coast Cannabis and like what the handles are.
Yeah, for sure.
They have any questions for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, East Coast Cannabis, you can find our website at eccannabis.com. And there you'll be able to find out about our grand opening for the flagship. You'll have access to our different retail locations. Our Instagram handle is at EC Cannabis Co. So we like to just say EC Cannabisco, but it's cannabis. Obviously, with searching for East Coast Cannabis, like we might show up, we might not. It depends how Instagram is feeling about us in that moment. And then our Facebook handle, you can find us at East Coast Canna Maine. So it's a slightly different handle, and I could get into the story of why that's a slightly different handle, but anyone who's worked in cannabis probably can understand why.
Yeah.
So East Coast Canna Maine, and then our Instagram is EC Cannabisco. But yeah, our website will house all that stuff too. So the best place to go is, at least for a cannabis company, is always going to be their website. So eccannabis.com. Yeah, and if you have any questions there, we have a contact page. I'm the one who gets all of it, so I'd give you my email, but this is a more efficient way where you just go to our website and fill out some contact form. If you have a question, I'm always happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, well, thanks for listening, and we will check you guys on the next episode.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks for listening with us today. Stay tuned for the latest in web marketing and design from ThrivePOP. Want to be a pop star? Head over to thrivepop.com/podcast to join our mailing list for episode notifications, sneak peeks, listener feedback, and more.